Okay, so I think we can start now. Okay, so you are all welcome once again. We are coming to just discuss. We are coming to discuss cultural ecology and then look at the various ideas or what comes in mind when we talk about cultural ecology, and then look at the various ideas and various theories whose idea have shaped the theory of cultural ecology, right? Okay, so without wasting much time, let us start. Okay, so when we talk about cultural ecology, what comes in mind? Right. Please, I hope you all can see the screen. Please, can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
That's fine. Okay. So let's start. So when we talk about cultural ecology, what at all is cultural ecology? Right. Now, when we talk about cultural ecology, we are talking about how humans adapt or human population adapt to the environment for their survival, right? And then the environment in turn also affects the human population. So cultural ecology, we know that culture, when we are talking about culture here, we are talking about the mechanism in which we adapt to the environment, right? We are talking about the mechanism with which we adapt to our environment, right? So that is what cultural ecology is about. How we use culture to adapt or to adapt to the environment, or we use culture to adapt the environment, and then the environment in turn also affects our culture. So that is what cultural ecology is about. So we are talking about the study of how culture adapts to the environment and how the environment in turn affects culture, right? So in technologically advanced societies, the environment ceases to be a controlling force. This means that the determinism of the environment is replaced by culture. The determinism of the environment is replaced by culture. Now, from Karl Marx's perspective, we've gotten to realize that it is the culture of a people living in a particular society that determines their force of production. We are talking about force of production. We are talking about how or the tools and how you. Please, can you mute yourself?
The price of the current coal drink.
Please, can you mute yourself?
Hey, we are serious. So, Wadama, me too. Wadama.
Okay, so from as I was saying, so from Karl Marx's perspective, right, is the culture that determines the force of production. Right, we are talking about the force of production. For example, from the simple societies like the hunter-gatherers, those people, right, they mainly how their forces of production was they were just going about, right, they were nomadic in nature, just going around gathering food and then also into hunting. So it was the culture that was in place then that determined the force of production, right? And then the force of production also determines the relations of production, right? So the kind of force of production that you will use determine how the relations of production is going to be, how people are going to relate to each other in an attempt to adapt to the environment for survival, right? And the relations of production in turn also brings about what we call the relations of production also brings about what we call the division of labor, right? So the relations of production will determine, okay, are we doing everything as a group together, or we are going to put every person, or we are going to assign every person according to their specialty. Right. We said that from the hunter-gatherers people, the simple societies, they were most of egalitarian, right? They did everything together. right? They did everything together. So if they are moving from one place to the other, they move in the group. If they are going to gather, they move in the group. Even though there was a sort of division of labor over there, but depending on the kind of force of production and the kind of relation of production that they had during that time, right? Their division of labor was mainly gender centered, right? Their division of labor was mainly gender centered and according to age. So if you are a woman, you have to stay around, and then you gather the farm produce and everything. And then if you are a man, there are those who will go and then go into hunting and all that. So the force of production determines the relations of production, and the relations of production also determines the division of labor, right? And the division of labor in turn, right, brings about what we call the property relations. So division of labor lead to the property relations, how property is to be owned. I just mentioned the fact that in the simple societies, property was, or the people were egalitarians. That means that they had equal access to the properties and the resources available. Right? It was sort of communitarianism, that it was communal. People had equal access to the properties of the society. Right? And then the property relations also brings about a change in the ideologies, right? Then we are talking about ideologies. We are talking about the culture of the people. So this is how the way we adapt to the environment, right, also brings about the environment causes a change, or causing a change in our culture. So in the actual sense, is the culture, that is the mechanism with which we adapted to the environment, that is the force of production, right, which in turn brought about a change, or brought about a change in the property relations, which in the other way around also brought about a change in the culture. So it's cultural ecology is about culture affecting, or we using culture to adapt to the environment, right? And then the environment in turn also affecting our culture. Please, I hope you get it. Okay, so that is cultural ecology. Now, let's look at some of the theorists whose ideas have shaped cultural ecology, right? So we are saying that Julian Steward is the one that coined the term cultural ecology, and then Julian Steward is intellectual grandson of Franz Boas. Now, when you talk about Franz Boas, his ideas has really shaped the discipline of anthropology with regards to how we are to study society and all that. So Franz Boas spoke about the fact that every human society have a distinct history, has a distinct historical background. So it is sort of an oversimplification and then hasty overgeneralization to say that every society started from a simple point and all that, right? So in as much as Julian Steward was being shaped by the ideas of Franz Boas, right, he did not use historical particularism in his work, right? But then he used cultural ecology. So Julian Steward was the brain behind the term cultural ecology, right? So he proposed the term multilinear evolution and criticized the unilinear evolution perspective, right? So the unilinear evolution perspective, according to Edward Taylor, human societies move from one stage to the other, right, from the simple stage. So sort of is the whole human race on an evolutionary continuum, that we all follow a particular pattern. So we move from one stage to the other, right? But then Julian Steward coined the term multilinear evolution. In as much as society evolves, right, every society has its own distinct environment that they adapt to, and as a result brings about a change, or brings about a change in how every society evolves, right? That is the concept of multilinear evolution as compared to unilinear evolution. Unilinear evolution plays the society in a particular, or in a progressive line. Every society moves in a particular progressive line, but then the multilinear evolution, right, is of the view that yes, in as much as culture and then society evolves from one stage to the other, every society has its own distinct environment that they adapt to, right? Every society has its own distinctive environment that they all adapt to. So it will be sort of oversimplification to say that every society is an evolutionary continuum. Right. Okay. So according to Julian Steward, not only does the environment shape the culture, but each culture contained a practical and useful adaptation to the environment. Yeah. So not only that, as I explained earlier on, not only that do we use or the environment shape the culture, but then every culture contains a practical, useful adaptation to the environment. So even though the environment shape our culture, right? However, every culture contains a distinctive way or a different way that we are going to adapt to the environment, a different way we adapt to the environment. So, taking the African society or the African context, for example, right, we have a distinct environment and then the kind of environmental forces that we were exposed to, right? So, in as much as the African society is static. The African society is dynamic. It changes. It has been changing even before the period of 1900, where colonization and everything set in. The African society was changing, was evolving from one stage to the other. But then we had a distinctive environment that we found ourselves in. From the European people, they moved from feudalism and now we have capitalism, right? But ours, we were not into feudalism, right? We have experienced colonization, and then the European people, they've not experienced colonization. So it will be sort of oversimplification according to the linear evolutionary perspective to say that every society has a particular historical background, and then we are moving on a particular trajectory so far as progress or development is concerned. So that is the ideas of Julian Steward. But then Julian Steward also grouped culture into two distinct parts, right? He grouped culture into two distinct parts. That is the core and the periphery. The core and the periphery. Now, when we are talking about the core, we are talking about the various social institutions, the various organizations, the political organization, and then possibly religion. So those are the core institutions that determines how we are supposed to adapt to the environment and all that. So those are the core. And then according to Julian Stewart, the core can never escape the effect of techno-environmental factors. We are talking about techno-environmental factors. We are talking about the technology as a whole, and we are talking about the environment as a whole. The environment here, we are talking about the natural environment, the nature, the natural environment. So in as much as it is the core, that is the social institutions that portrays how we adapt to the environment. The social institutions, however, cannot escape the effect of techno-environmental factors. And then we also have the periphery, right? We have the periphery, which constitute the artistic patterns, that is symbols, and then the idiosyncratic behavior. So we are talking about idiosyncratic behavior. We are talking about behaviors that are peculiar to the individual. So in as much as we are in a society, right, we all have certain behaviors that are peculiar to the society, or that are peculiar to the individual. So these behaviors that are peculiar to the individual are being shaped by the techno-environmental factors. Right? They are being shaped by the techno-environmental factors. So that is according to Julian Stewart, his idea about cultural ecology. So he criticized the ulilinear evolution perspective and then coined the term multilinear evolution. Right? From the onset, I said that Julian Stewart was an intellectual grandson of Franz Boas, and Franz Boas, one of his ideas is historical particularism. So you can see the effect of Franz Boas on Julian Stewart's idea of cultural ecology. Even though Julian Stewart did not did not use the term historical particularism as the title of his work, however, you can see the effect of Franz Boas on Julian Steward in his explanation of cultural ecology. Yes, even though society moves on a different, or society moves or transforms from one stage to the other, every society has its own distinctive environment that they adapt to for survival. So that is Julian Steward idea of cultural ecology. Now we can also move to another theorist called Leslie White. Right. Now, Leslie White's idea, even though they were all talking about how we use culture, how culture adapt to the environment, and then also how the environment also in turn affects our culture as a whole, right? But then there were some sort of differences. There were some sort of differences with regards to their 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 propositions, right? Mr. E, please, I'll get back to you later. Okay, so let me finish up and then I'll get back to you. Okay, so you can hold on with your question. When I finish, I'll just unmute everybody and then you can talk. Okay, so Leslie White, we have 10 minutes, so you can join in again when the time is your time is up. But then I hope that within 10 minutes I'll be able to finish with the cultural ecology and then we move to a different topic. Thank you. So Leslie White, in as much as they were with Julian Steward, they were all talking about cultural ecology. They all explained cultural ecology from a different perspective. As Julian Steward accepted and then built on the ideas of Franz Boas' historical particularism, Leslie White criticized the idea of historical particularism and supported the Ulinian evolutionism perspective instead. So according to Leslie White, society moves from a simple form to a complex form, right? And then the transition of society from a simple form to a complex form, it does not only entail the structural movement of society, right? It does not only entail society transforming in form, but also the ideological transition. So this places societies in different ideological continuum, right? This idea of Leslie White actually depicts a sense of ethnocentrism. You saying that one society or placing one society is, when it comes to ideologies and intellect, one society is as the upper stage and then the other society is at the lower stage. So that brings about what we call the ethnocentrism in Leslie's idea of cultural ecology by saying that every society transforms from one stage to the other, not only in form, but also a transition in ideologies, right? Our intellectuals, the way we make sense of things, right? So Leslie White, Leslie White viewed culture as a reality in itself, shaped by what techno economics, right? So one difference that you can also infer from the ideas of Julian Stewart and then that of Leslie White is that we will see that Leslie White mostly focused on techno-economics or techno-environmental factors, whilst Julian Stewart mostly focused on environmental factors. Right. So Leslie White focused on techno-environmental factors, while Julian Stewart mostly focused on the environmental factors. So according to him, culture can be measured based on the degree of power that is used per capita per year as an adaptation strategy to the environment, right? So according to Leslie White, advanced societies like modern societies use more sophisticated and inanimate form of energy. You see that modern societies, we use electricity, we use fuel, we use a lot of machines which are a form of inanimate objects to adapt to the environment. And then the simple societies use or is more centered on human energy. We use our human labor to produce. And then because of the difference in the form of energy that the different society uses, it brings about what we call economic surplus in one society, especially those that use more sophisticated and an inanimate form of energy. they tend to produce more as compared to that of those who use human energy, because our human energy has a limit, right? But then using a form of a sophisticated form of inanimate energy brings about what we call economic surplus. We are able to produce more, right, and then even sell to other people. So that is his idea of cultural ecology. So according to him, culture can be measured based on the degree of energy that is being used. But then Leslie White, but then Julian Steward, in as much as there is evolution, all right, but then you can't measure culture. Every culture has its own environment that affects or that determines the way they are going to adapt to it. But then Leslie White did not take such a circumstance or such a situation into consideration. But then he looked at the fact that every culture is on a progressive continuum, that we have a different way that we adapt to the environment. So he placed us on he placed every culture, that is simple societies and then advanced societies, in a continuum, right, based on the degree with which the energy that is being used as a means of adaptation strategy to the environment. So Leslie White also plays culture in 4 equal parts, as Julian Steward plays culture in 2 equal parts. Leslie White plays culture in 4 equal parts. That is technological aspect of culture. He also had a social structural aspect of culture, and then also ideological aspect of culture, and then the attitudinal aspect of culture. With the attitudinal aspect of culture, we are talking about the emotions and sentiments, and then the ideological aspect of culture, we are talking about values, right? And then the social structural aspect of culture, we are talking about the social institutions, and right, and then the technological aspect of culture, how we use an advanced form of inanimate form of energy to adapt to our environment. So you see that with a modern form of a modern societies, the culture or the environment do not have control over the culture, but rather is a culture that has control over the environment. Just bear in mind, I said that we are talking about culture here. We are talking about the mechanisms that you use as an adaptation strategy to the environment. But in this case, it's not the culture that is adapted to the environment because of technology, right? It's not the culture that is adapted to the environment, but rather we are using the culture as a means to influence the environment. Right now, gone were the days that the depending on the season, that will determine how we are going to cultivate. But then with the advent of technology, with irrigation machines and all that, we now influence, we determine when we are going to plant and when we are not going to plant. So it's not the environment that is determining how we should adapt to it, but rather the culture determines how we adapt to the environment. Right. And then the next thing that we are also going to talk about is the features of cultural ecology, right? So the features of cultural ecology, or cultural ecology, emphasizes on the impact of the environment on culture. It also focuses on the adaptation. That is how human population adapts to the techno environment and the environmental conditions. And then it also focuses on the impact of technology, how technology also affects us. And then there's also more emphasis on ethic rather than emic data. That is the objective conditions of existence, right? So Franz Boas focused on emic data, studying society according to its own terms. But then the cultural ecology, we are studying society based on the environment that the society is situated, right? So that is a whole brief idea about what cultural ecology is about. Okay, so this brings us to the end of the discussion on cultural ecology. So please, if you have any question, kindly raise your hands. We have 2 minutes. Kindly raise your hands, and then I will just respond to everyone's question. If you have any question, you can raise your hands, and then we take it from there. Any question? So if there is no question, then you are going to end the class. It's going to end in about a minute, so you can join again so that we continue with the economic anthropology. But then if you still have any question, you can bring it up in the next lecture so that I will answer before we move on to the economic anthropology. Thank you very much.